Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome to the Elevate Your Soul podcast. Today, I'm interviewing Laura Ellen. She is a holistic sex, love, and life coach, keynote speaker, host of the Sexual Wellness podcast, and a passionate advocate for pleasure-based living. Today, Laura and I are going to talk about sex. Why do some women experience painful sex? And how to be penetrated without the pain. Libido, why some people experience a low libido, and her top recommendations for a better sex life, plus so much more. I hope you guys enjoy this podcast episode. Hello, Lauren. Welcome to the Elevate Your Soul podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here talking about some of the things that I love to talk about the most.
Some sex and juiciness. Yeah, I'm excited as well. First question I have for you, though, is what elevates your soul?
Spaciousness and just having the time that I need to be truly present with my body and with my life so that I can enjoy every last drop.
Yeah. Would you see yourself as an introvert or an extrovert? Like, how do you recharge your gas tank, refill it?
Yeah, definitely an introvert.
Yeah.
But I also love to connect with community.
Yeah.
In all sorts of ways. Yeah.
We're all both. But I recharge on my own as well. So when you said space, I was like, sounds a bit more like an introvert.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, let's talk about painful sex. What is it? And can you describe on more of like a physical level what's actually happening with our bodies if we're being penetrated and it's painful versus someone who's being penetrated and it's not painful? Is there actually like scientifically something that's different within our bodies, or is it in our minds or emotions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when it comes to painful sex, there's all different types of painful sex. So we could really break this down into physical pain, emotional pain, and spiritual pain, because there are conditions out there, scientific conditions that women have, like vulvodynia, for example, where you do have physical pain during intercourse. Other types of physical pain can really manifest up near the cervix. And, there's so many varying reasons as to why we can experience pain up there on a physical level. That can also be deeply tied into the emotional body as well. And so then when you've got emotional pain, that can come from, perhaps we're having sex with someone who we love, but our hearts aren't fully in the experience. Our hearts aren't saying a full body yes to the experience, and neither is our pussy. And so therefore, you can start to have an emotionally painful experience because deep down, somewhere inside, you're actually not truly consenting. And what it's doing is it's eroding your sense of self-trust, and it's actually hurting you.
Yeah.
And so that kind of pain is more subtle, but over time it can have really, really severe impacts. And then, spiritual pain, I guess, would be taking it to the cosmic level, where you're sort of, it's still very linked in with the emotional pain, where you're not kind of in it on a soul level. You're not meeting the other person on a soul level, and therefore you're not feeling fulfilled. You're not getting your needs met, and it is causing you a spiritual pain because deep down that it's not right.
Right, that the intimacy with that person isn't right, or maybe
it could be that
you're in.
The relationship, the dynamic, the intimacy, I mean, every single relationship is different, right? But your soul always knows whether this interaction is actually going to be beneficial for you or not. I mean, there are no bad decisions in life, right? We just make a decision and then we learn from it afterwards, hopefully. Eventually we do. And so basically how we can gauge where we go in life is by following our heart and our soul's desire to like make us to like make us feel good, essentially. And when we are bypassing that and not listening to our body's wisdom, we're not listening to these no's, even if it is with someone who we truly love, because it's not always about the relationship. It could just be the time. You know, so often I work with so many clients who have partners who they completely love and adore deeply, but actually they're just going through a season within their sexuality where perhaps they're not wanting a lot of penetrative sex, and they haven't been able to find a way to communicate to their partner that they're looking for new ways of intimacy, to connect physically, to connect deeply without having penetrative sex at this time.
Exploring all the other ways of being intimate instead of that one for a while.
Yeah, totally.
Do you work with females only, or you have male clients as well?
I work with women only in my like workshops, and in my basically just in my workshops is where I have co-ed spaces, but my clients are very female.
Interesting. And what I've heard with the painful sex is that if a woman isn't turned on, and versus when she is really turned on and in the moment, her cervix will actually move, like physically it will move up higher in the body so that she can be penetrated deeper. And when she's not turned on, when she's not getting wet, that the cervix stays a bit lower. And then that pain that you're having when you're being penetrated during sex can actually be caused from just hitting against the cervix.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. And the other things that happen during our arousal phase of sex and sexuality is that our muscles and our yoni actually start to relax. And so when we're having quick, goal-orientated, clit-centric, cum-centric sex, the muscles don't actually have time to relax and drop into pleasure. Because you think about it, when you're going for that kind of orgasm, you're sort of tensing, you're pushing for it to happen, your breath shortens, and your cervix is also a part of that contraction.
Right.
Whereas to start to have those like deeper, more sort of like bodily expansive orgasms, it's actually about slowing down and relaxing all of those muscles so that your cervix does come back up and your whole yoni actually expands into pleasure, and softens, and you drop into a deeper sense of pleasure. And that happens in so many ways. I mean, so like we said before, we've got the physical aspect, arousal by touching other parts of the body, but what a lot of people don't talk about is female arousal is so much more than physical. And so some of the best dirty talk that a female could ever hear would be, I've got you. I'm going to look up, like, I've got you. You can take as long as you need, I love you. You're so safe, like that kind of stuff. Like that female's ears is like, my pussy is dripping open right now.
Right? Not like I'm gonna smack that ass and you're gonna like be my toy. Like, no. No.
Yeah. I mean, of course there are like states where it's like you're in that dynamic. You're already in a really empowered, beautiful relationship where foreplay for the two of you looks like treating each other like a king and queen all day. Responding to each other's messages straight away and not playing any games, like, oh, I can't message him or her back for a couple of hours. That's going to shut your sexual center down. That's gameplay. When you establish and build safety and trust within your relationship every single day, that is foreplay. Foreplay starts when orgasm ends. And so when you're in a really empowered relationship like that, where you do feel completely safe and understood and seen and heard every single day, that's where you can have, you know, baby tap my ass and like play, like really truly play in that kink space,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I totally agree. I love that saying. So like when an orgasm finishes, that's when the foreplay starts. I'm in love with that. And it's so true. If you're in a relationship and you're having issues about who knows what, and there's some tension going on, the energy and the chemistry in the bedroom is completely different than what it usually is if you know, if everything's fine or if you would be on holiday or whatever.
Yeah, totally, totally. And I think like the best way to like stay in a juicy receivership space, especially for a woman, is to just like, you know, really treat and encourage a culture within your relationship of absolute love and appreciation all the time. So, you know, that goes both ways. Like, yes, of course, you know, men need to adore us and all that kind of stuff, but like we need to also show up for our men as well. So, like just checking out our emasculation habits, you know, like with the rise of feminine superiority, like feminine empowerment and all of that, has come like feminine superiority where we can really emasculate our men. And so just checking ourselves and making sure that we are really creating this nourishing, loving, vibrant cultural space for your relationship to thrive in and outside the bedroom. Because even when you're going through conflict, it's how you treat each other in those times that is going to affect your sex life in the long run. Because if you're getting nasty towards each other, that hurts, and that hurt will stay in your heart, and it will block your pussy, and it will block your turn on for you know, months and months to come.
Or it'll block your cock. Guys,
it'll cock block. Yeah,
yeah, for sure. And I don't like making generalizations between female and male or masculine and feminine, but what I do realize is that when in a relationship you realize that the sex life starts to die down, I feel like men are more inclined to like want to have sex and like push you to have sex, so that they're like, oh, I want to keep having sex and I want this amazing sex life, so let's just have lots of sex. When I feel like for the female, it's important that you work on those emotions. And as you said, if you're being nasty with each other, or if you're feeling hurt, to resolve that, treat each other nicely, resolve the conflict that's going on. And that's easier for a woman than to surrender and relax. And as you said, open up her pussy and get wet and all those things. So yeah, that's just a side note that I wanted to say as well.
Yeah, totally. I think there's a couple of really important aspects to that. And so it's like, as the feminine, we crave a lot of closeness, and we crave emotional, I mean, men crave emotional intimacy as well. And there is so much amazing research and data out there, like new data, new research, because it's actually, just as a little side note, there hasn't been a lot of funding for big studies about sexuality. Like the last major study that was done was in the 1950s, the masseuse study. That's a long time ago.
Wow.
Like so much has changed culturally since then, not to mention like how we can analyze and test these subjects is completely different as well. And so in the last decade or so, there's like this whole new wave of new research coming out, and it's completely myth busting a lot of these stories. Like, you know, men have higher libidos than women. Like that is completely busted to the absolute floor. Like that is simply not true. It is it's more that, you know, women need other things to get turned on, which, you know, we don't actually address in sex education. And that's where it's going wrong. It doesn't mean that women don't want sex as much, and like the relationship dies and it's because the woman has a lower libido.
Right.
That's just not relevant. It's just that we get into this habit of having service sex.
Yeah.
Instead of only having sex when it truly feels right. And that's when it's really important to start to find ways to have physical intimacy, deep physical intimacy, and, you know, emotional intimacy, perhaps without penetration. Because expanding your capacity to share and connect with your partner that is outside of just penetrative sex is going to is going to do wonders for your sex life, because it just takes so much pressure off.
Mm.
Another thing about painful sex that I'd like to add to this before we kind of move on is that as women, we store a lot of emotion and we store a lot of trauma inside our yoni, so in our vaginal canal, and especially up towards our cervix. And that's another reason why it can be painful.
Yeah.
And so I've actually on my podcast, I've got a episode, it's called the Health, Hygiene and Microbiome of the Vagina, where I interview a scientists on these conditions like vulvodynia and painful sex in the cervix, and get her perspective on it. And even from her perspective, there is still an emotional, neurological link to the emotional body when it comes to painful sex. And so starting to inquire about, doing yoni de-armoring. And so for people who haven't heard of that before, that's simply a massage technique to help loosen the knots that are in your vagina. Like, you think about it, you go to a masseuse to get the knots that are the knots out in your shoulders because you're on your laptop all the time. It's the same in your vagina. And so we can store and hold a lot of tension in there, especially soft or hard sexual trauma from the past, bad relationships, parental trauma, down to that time when the guy gave you the fingers in the shopping mall parking lot and it really hurt your feelings. We can store all of that like tense emotion inside our womb and in our vaginas, and that's why we can't relax, and it's why we are blocked from experiencing so much pleasure, and it's why we can get really numb and dissociate, because we're still holding all that trauma in our womb. And then we're trying to have sex and because it's actually touching on those points and we're feeling so much, it's like feeling painful, you want to cry, and all of these emotions are coming up with it, but we haven't actually got the tools or the awareness as to how to deal with it. Not to mention, we're not always in a relationship where we feel safe enough to cry, hit and scream a pillow while we're having sex. Like, maybe we're actually just not there yet. Like, that's not what they teach us in porn. Like, what? And so we can dissociate into our heads and start to get into that really heady space. And completely.
Do you have contacts that are in New Zealand or around the world to do, like, if you wanted to work on massaging out those knots in the vagina wall, do you actually have people who you go see who will actually massage the inside of a female's vagina? Or
yeah, totally. So you can go to a professional masseuse. And I do know some people here in New Zealand and Australia and a couple around the globe as well.
I will ask you at the end, and I will definitely, just for anyone listening now, I will put those links or their names in the show notes because I think that is fascinating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can also do it yourself. And if you go to a good masseuse, like, it's actually not about going straight into the vagina. Like, you might actually just spend a lot of time around your heart to build trust before you're even ready for that, because it's more about you establishing a really deep sense of boundaries and knowing that it's okay and that you're safe to go at your own pace. That's a really big part of it. And to anyone who's living in an area where I don't have a masseuse that I could recommend, or so on and so forth, it's super important to do your research. And when you are don't just Google, yoni masseuse in your area. Like, don't do that. Like, get a recommendation from a friend. Like, there are so many beautiful Facebook groups out there with thousands of women in it who have like personal experience and recommendations. And then when you find someone, I always recommend this to people who are looking for, a tantra teacher or any kind of sexuality teacher, is to research their lives personally. Who is this teacher outside of their professional life? Because you're going to be getting their transmission essentially. And so it's super important that you actually resonate with their values, and that you can feel safe and held by this person, and actually kind of respect who they are. That's a really important.
Wow, interesting. That's not something I would have thought of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good advice there. All right, moving
Mm.
on to libido. Why is there this myth that women have a low libido? Or not only a myth, why do people, and I know men have this as well, why do we go through phases where we just have no libido, we're not wanting to have sex? Is that healthy? Is that normal? Or has something gone wrong? Or what can you say about that?
Yeah, again, like everyone is so unique and it's hard to sort of put everything into a big sort
Yeah.
of generalized pool. But I think in general, first of all, I'll talk about the seasons of sexuality. So I'll start with women. As women, we are cyclic beings. We go through every month 4 different stages of our cycles, and in each stage is a different season of sexuality.
Yeah.
So in our follicular phase, which is that first week just after our period, that is essentially the spring of our sexuality. That's when we're starting to, the hormones are starting to rise again,
Mhm.
but we're kind of coming out of winter. So we're excited, we're looking forward to summer, but we're not quite there yet. So that's the perfect time to start focusing on like, spending more time with foreplay and just like being really compassionate and loving towards yourself and not expecting to be like as high up and jumpy as like
Yeah.
you would be in summer, for example. And then in ovulation, that is your summer. Like um that is when you are just like naturally attracting life. That is when you can go out to parties, meet new people, be very curious, try new things, like be very explorative, have lots of fun.
Yeah.
And then in your luteal phase, you're in the autumn, so you're coming back down. So that's a really beautiful time for rest and reflection, and kind of have slightly more emotive, like dramatic, loving, tender experiences that are longer and more heartfelt. Those are the sort of the times. I mean, every woman again is different. Tune into your own body.
Yeah.
Those are the times where you might have these really kind of big emotional releases in your sexuality. Like it's time to sort of do those big tantric practices and so on and so forth. And then when you're bleeding, again, this is different to every single woman. That's also a really beautiful time to have a rest because you're in your winter. Like it's a time to sort of stop and like recharge yourself for spring, because the winter is essential. Like all 4 seasons are essential for the cycle of life, and there's no point in making them wrong or bad or judge them. And just know that every phase is important for the next one to have this like healthy ticking over cycle. Otherwise you can lead to burnout and just like get confused and things can get messy. So respect your cycle and just like tune into what's true for you, because again, that's like a generalization, but it's different
Yes.
for every single woman.
I was just about to say, like, moral of the story, I guess, just be intuitive. And when you're not in the mood to have sex, don't. When you are, do. And I want to say as well, like, I know women who absolutely love having sex when they're on their period, which would be their winter.
Totally.
So it
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
generalization. I feel as well, like, probably, I don't know what the statistics are. I wish I knew right now, but I'm guessing it's probably more than half the women are on birth control or have the hormonal thing in their cervix or the rod in their arm. So all these women who are on these contraceptive hormonal pills where they're not even getting a period, or they're only getting their period once every 3 months, then that cycle, a lot of women won't be able to really relate to that.
Yeah, totally. And that's so true. I'm not here to shame any woman who's taking hormonal drugs. Like, it's like totally an option and it's there for us, and like let's make the most of it if it feels right for us. So
Yeah. Being intuitive, I guess.
But still, I mean, just like be intuitive, because you're still a woman and you're still cyclic. And, perhaps you might not feel like the certain seasons as in depth, but you can almost create your own ceremony. Like, what do you want it to look like? This is your life, create it. Like if just be in tune with your own body, and don't beat yourself up when you don't want to have sex. Like for starters, there's more than one way to have sex. There's more one way to feel loved, to get your need of physical intimacy and connection met, and to get your need to be seen and loved and understood. There's more than one way to get all of those needs met that don't involve sex. So it's about really expanding your toolkit actually, and just taking that pressure off, because sex is so much more than fucking.
Yeah.
So much more than fucking. And yeah, when you are really just like going through a big phase of not wanting to have any sex, I think the first and really important thing to do is to not beat yourself up about it, because we all experience that in life. And so as a woman, we've got our monthly cycles, whether you are on
beat you up about it.
what's that?
Or not let your boyfriend beat you up about it. Not physically, but yeah, emotionally.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
For the man to be like, what did I do wrong? Like, why don't you want to have sex with me? Like, oh,
totally.
a different way right now.
Well, I mean, but this is the thing. It's like, this is how we validate our love for each other. And it is. I mean, like, sex is the glue that binds us. But again, it's like what I was saying before, there's more than one way to do that like doesn't involve penetrative sex. Like, you can still be very physically intimate and affectionate and like feel that love for each other without actually having penetrative sex. So it's about broadening your horizon in a way. And again, I know porn doesn't teach us those things. It's like, why? Like soft sex. But like feminine monthly cycles aside, even in life we go through monthly cycles. Like you've just had a baby, you've just like lost your job, or you're just going through a phase where hormonally you're just like, no, I'm not into it. That is totally okay. So the first thing to do is to not beat yourself up. The next thing to do is to check out your hormones, like actually go and get a hormonal test and figure out what's going on. Another thing is like health and wellness is super important to your libido. Like you want to know what the greatest aphrodisiac is of all time? It's actually loving yourself and showing up for yourself in terms of nutrition and fitness and, just like doing what's right for you every single day. Like that is going to turn you on more than like whatever those blue pills are for like hard cocks. I forget, Viagra, like actually like really if you're wanting to.
It will turn other
people.
What was that? Oh, when you're taking care of yourself, it'll turn you on, but it'll also turn other people on as well. When other people see that within you, like, wow, this girl's taking care of herself, or this man's taking care of himself. He's looking after himself. He puts his health first. That is very attractive to see in another person as well.
Totally. It's magnetic. And just start there. And another reason why our libidos can just like hit the floor is like sometimes you're actually just not with someone who you want to be having sex with, and I think like it's like really edgy to say that, but it's like perhaps now, like if you've been in a long-term relationship for 10 years and you don't want to have sex with them, I'm not telling you to leave them. That's not what I'm saying here. But if you're in a relationship that's actually like quite toxic and is just super not serving you at all, and your libido's gone, then run a self-inquiry about that. Like sometimes it's actually just the dynamic and the sexual chemistry that just isn't working, and that is what is turning you off. If your heart is having to shut down to engage physically with another person, then that is going to numb you out and ruin your libido and your self-esteem. So that's another factor to have in mind.
And it doesn't always have to be a highly toxic or an abusive relationship in order for it not to be right. You can have like a lovely relationship and love the person and really enjoy each other's company, but it can still not be the right relationship style. You might want to be friends, or you might just want to change the dynamics of the relationship.
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. Like, not all relationships need to be toxic to be like not right anymore. And it's just, it's life. And so you just self-love again, being honest and true to yourself.
So important. All right. What are your top 3 recommendations for people to uplift and enhance their sex life?
Oh, okay, the first one's so easy for me, and like probably my favorite tool to recommend to start having the best sex ever would be meditation.
Right.
Because what stops us from experiencing pleasure even in the day-to-day? It's our head, and so like we're having sex and we are in our heads worrying, oh, my boobs look saggy, my belly looks big, is he enjoying it? And men are having their own versions of performance anxiety and so on and so forth.
Oh my God, I need to do the
But
dishes later.
yeah, like running through your all of that stuff, you
Yeah.
know. Meditation, honestly, like I can't say it enough. Like once you establish a really consistent, beautiful meditation practice, which can be anything, there's a million different styles of meditation out there. There's no reason why you can't find one that works for you.
Yeah.
Find one and do it, because it's going to completely revolutionize your sex life.
Yes.
Um,
And you mean by
so
that, you mean like meditation helps you be present and in the moment. And you're saying that is what's going to enhance your sex life.
absolutely, yeah. So being able to be present in your body and actually experience the bodily sensations that you're having, because you're
Self-awareness, right? Of what's going
self-aware.
on in
Well,
your body.
yeah,
Yeah.
like pleasure is in the body, it's not in your mind. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
actually just need to be in the body, basically.
Yeah.
I would say that the next one would be create space. You know, like we are so busy. We wear this like badge of busy as a measurement tool of our self-worth, you know, which is just it's last decade, I feel like. Spaciousness, like pleasure exists in spaciousness and in the present moment, and we can't be truly present, we can't be in our bodies if, again, we're in our heads thinking about our next appointment that we need to go to, jam packed, filling our schedule with things to do, when you know there's no room for flow to just lay in bed with your lover and like see where the journey takes you.
Yeah, be
You know?
spontaneous with sex. That's super fun as well. Like, where is there room
Yeah.
to spontaneously have sex? If you're like, right when I finish this, I need to do this, and then this is crossing over to this, and like your calendar has like no white space anymore, and you're like, well, I must be being. That means I'm successful though, right? Because I'm getting a lot of shit done.
Yeah.
So that do you actually enjoy? How much of that's filling your cup?
Exactly. You nailed it. Like if you're so busy all the time, then there's no space to like really kind of enjoy every single moment, including the pleasure that's available to you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, spaciousness. And the last one would be just like raise your erotic intelligence, like raise your erotic IQ, you know. And there are so many ways that you can do that. So like listening to this podcast is one of them, like listening to my podcast, which is all about sex. Like there's an amazing online platform called OMGYes, which is like the newest and latest studies about female pleasure. Reading books, like, you know, getting a sex coach and just like really starting to understand your body. Like start to self-pleasure, masturbate, understand your body and what turns you on, because it's super important to go into your sexual experiences from a place of fullness and overflow instead of taking to fill a void. We put so much responsibility on the other person to please us. And then when we don't have an orgasm, it's like, oh, he didn't make me come, or she didn't make me come, or he was bad in bed, or blah, 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 you know, whatever, all those stories. It's actually not them. It's you. If you can't take responsibility for your own pleasure and communicate what you need, then that's on you to wear. But you can't do that unless you actually know what it is that you want. So take the time, get all of the candles that you want, buy yourself flowers, get your favorite piece of like sugar-free chocolate cake from, you know, the raw vegan deli, and you know, put your favorite music on, get essential oils, get a sheepskin rug, get a huge mirror in front of you, and like start like just like fucking loving yourself up, and have like beautiful self-pleasure sessions where it's all about you getting to know yourself.
Yeah. Do you think some people are scared to do that? Do you think some people are scared to find out what really turns them on and what really makes them feel pleasurable?
Yeah, totally. There's all sorts of like blocks that can come up in that, like, and that's just like natural. I mean, we could sit here for hours talking about some of the things that stop us from stepping into our like pleasure and our like our capacity to like really share our femininity and our like goodness with other people. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, there's all sorts of ways. I mean, like getting therapy, like seeing, like I coach women all the time with stuff like that. My Queendom course is all about just like stepping into your feminine essence and your power. And it starts in the heart, you know, it starts up here. Yeah.
And how do people get in touch with you if they want to contact you or look at your work or do work with you?
Yeah, so I think Instagram is like my favorite place to show up. Like Instagram's definitely where I have the biggest party. So if you're on Instagram, come on over. It's underscore Laura, Laura, underscore Ellen, Ellen.
Mm-hmm.
You can also find my website, which is laura-ellen.com. You can search for my podcast. It's called the Sexual Wellness Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, the whole thing.
Awesome.
And send me a DM, a PM, an email, like, whatever. Just
Awesome. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
I would love you guys to check out her podcast, and I'll put those links in the show notes as well for people to find.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good one.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been awesome. I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I can tell. I know, me too. I find it fascinating. Always to learn about this stuff.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much. Hey YouTube fam, if you like this video, make sure to hit the like button below. And if you think a friend, a family member, or just someone you know who could benefit from this podcast episode, please share this video with them. And if you've been enjoying the Elevate Your Soul podcast, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for new episodes weekly.